I'm Carla.
And I'm Keyes.
And we're the History Twins.
Welcome to our podcast where history is more than just dates and dead people.
Join us each episode as we explore the past through music and story. So, to get you in the mood for today's topic, the legend of Sleepy Hollow,
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 we're going to start with our version of Disney's Headless Horseman song.
When spooks have a midnight jamboree, they break it up with fiendish glee. Ghosts are bad, but the one that's cursed is the Headless Horseman. He's the worst.
That's right, he's a fright most every night.
And he goes jogging across the land, holding his noggin in his hand. Demons take one look and groan and hit the road for parts unknown.
Beware, take care, he rides alone.
There's no spook like a spook that's spurned.
They don't like him and he's really burned.
He swears to the longest day he's dead.
He'll show them that he can get ahead.
They say he's tired of his flaming top. He's got a yen to make a swap. So he rides each night, I fear, to find a head in the hollow inn.
Now he likes them little, he likes them big, parted in the middle or a wig, brown or blonde or even red. The Headless Horseman needs a head with a hip, hip and a clippity clop. He's out looking for a chop and chop, so don't stop to figure out a plan. You can't reason with a headless man. That was fun.
That was fun. I like that. And I had fun doing that.
Yeah, me too. By the way, that song was originally done in 1949, and Bing Crosby was the singer.
Oh, sure.
And it was an animated Disney film called The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And the original recording has these cool jazzy backup harmonies.
Right.
And so since it was only
It's just us.
We did our best, but I'm also linking to that original recording so you can hear it for yourself and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So let's get to the whole beginning and what is the legend of, like, who wrote it? How did it all get started?
Sure. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is Washington Irving's most famous story. It's been adapted. It's been told for, 200 years at this point, over 200 years, because it was published in 1819.
Woo!
Yeah. And it's been adapted and made into films and made into a television series, and it's known the world over.
Yeah, and it also tells the story of Tarrytown, which is a place where strange things happen, and the townsfolk seem entranced by spirits and ghouls. Now, as we mentioned in our last episode about Huldah, the other legend of Sleepy Hollow.
That's right.
Sleepy Hollow was said to have had a spell cast on it by a German witch doctor who was said to have given the place a sleepy quality.
Right.
And we were saying that Huldah, she could have been that German witch doctor, although when you hear the story, we were thinking it's more of a masculine kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, German witch doctor it is. And the Legend of Sleepy Hollow tells the story of Ichabod Crane. He is a teacher who comes to live in Tarrytown.
Right.
And he meets a mysterious fate.
Well, he lives in Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, right. He comes to live. That's right. Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown are right next to each other, and that's a whole other story. But yes, Ichabod Crane meets a mysterious fate.
He does indeed.
I'm
not going to tell you what it is.
Exactly. But legend has it that he is the victim of the dreaded
Headless Horseman.
Who allegedly, reportedly, supposedly haunts Sleepy Hollow. And no fall season is complete without the telling of this autumnal classic.
Absolutely.
So, but who is this Headless Horseman?
That's a good question. The Headless Horseman is supposed to be a Hessian soldier. And the Hessians were mercenaries from Germany that the British Army hired during the American Revolution. And this particular Hessian soldier had his head taken off by a cannonball.
Oh.
And his body was dragged by his horse into Sleepy Hollow. And they buried him just outside of the old Dutch church burying ground, outside of the consecrated ground. And it's said that his spirit rises nightly to look for his head, and if he can't find his head, he'll find someone else's.
Gotta cover my neck right now. Well, I also enjoy the story because at the heart of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, there's a love triangle.
Yeah, there is that.
Keeps things interesting. But I often forget until Jonathan Kruk reminds us, Washington Irving was like the first American best-selling author.
That's true.
To have the whole the fictional best-selling with the leading lady or the romance and the triangle and the hero and the villain. Like he was the first American best-selling author to do this.
They say he was the first American man of letters.
Ah, yes. And I read somewhere that Washington Irving was the first American writer to make his living primarily through his creative work. Yeah, and he's the first American acclaimed by the English literary establishment.
How about that?
As worthy of recognition.
Wow.
Oh, and he also wrote Rip Van Winkle.
Sure. He wrote a number of things. He wrote his multi-volume history of New York. He wrote several volumes of short fiction. And but Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow are just two of the more famous stories.
Yeah.
Of the many that he wrote.
Yeah, and here where we are in the Hudson Valley, Westchester area of New York, we are steeped in that legend and that storytelling and the history of Washington Irving. You can't get away from it.
Well, and for me as a kid, I was fascinated. I actually had a poster on my wall growing up of the U.S. postage stamp of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
They had a stamp?
They had a stamp. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And you had the poster of it.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Isn't it?
And so it's so interesting because for over 10 years, you have been the organist for the evening performances given by Jonathan Kruk, the storyteller, at the Old Dutch Church at Sleepy Hollow.
That's right. I composed a score for it, and I play it every night that Jonathan's performing.
And when you and I first met or got together, you were playing this organ. It was so loud, and so the sound was immense, and to hear like the da na 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 na, you just feel it in your body throughout
the building shakes.
The building shakes, and it's really cool,
isn't it?
Yeah. And the church was another thing that makes it like really cool. Now the church was originally built in 1685.
That's right.
And formally organized as the Dutch Reformed Church in 1697. That's like really old, right? It has limited electricity.
That's right.
Yeah, so part of the magic of those evening performances is that they have to be lit by candle. Like, so the church is lit by candle. There's like the chandelier down in the middle of the ceiling, and then all of the
wall sconces.
The wall sconces are candles, and that gives it such like this vibe.
It certainly does. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It's very atmospheric.
Yeah. Now, as cool as that was for 2018, 2019. You were able to get out from behind the organ to tell the daytime legend, to tell your own spin on the daytime version, which I think is really interesting considering, at this point, it had been maybe about 10 years that you had been performing the show as, like, you'd been accompanying Jonathan. And finally, or not finally, but eventually, because there was such
Jonathan used to do a daytime, like a matinee, and that was 4 to 5 shows in a day, and that was a bit much. So he decided to just do nighttime shows, and they needed a daytime performer, and
because there was such a demand.
Yeah, and I've heard the show a few times,
just a few.
So I put together my own version.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's watch a clip for that now.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
All right. I don't like to talk about it, but I will for you. See, in all of Sleepy Hollow, I was the only one that didn't believe in ghosts. I swear on it every night. No such thing as ghosts. Y'all got bats in your belfries, you know. But then one night, coming out of the tavern, you know, I'm riding down the post road, and I feel a rider coming behind me, you know. So I slow down, you know, let him pass, but he rides right up next to me. So I try to back up a little bit, you know, and he slows down. I speed up to get ahead, he speeds up. I move to the left, he moves to the left. I move to the right, he moves to the right. I turn to see who this guy is, and he's got no head. Well, he's got it, but it's in his hands. I take off as fast as I can, but he's right behind me. I turn to look, and he's standing in the stirrups with his head in his hand, and he hurls it at me, cracks me in the back of the head, and sends me down to the pavement, and he disappears into the night. The only reason I'm still here. The only reason I'm still alive. The only reason I still have my head. That horseman, he let me live. He let me live so I could tell you and you and you. The Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. He's real. He's real.
Wow, that is so cool.
That's one of my favorite parts, that story right there.
Yeah, I remember that time. There was this one year you did that story, and people started clapping. It was so moving. It's like, wow. And you know, I really enjoy the difference between your two shows because, you know, you have, I always tell everyone it's apples and oranges. Like, you cannot compare because you're still telling the story, but you're doing it in your own way. And each of you have a different approach to it. And John Payne, who is the sexton of the church, sexton is like the caretaker of the Old Dutch Church at Sleepy Hollow. He compared the versions of Jonathan told the King James version, and you did the revised standard version of the story because
it's true. Another way to look at it is Jonathan is very true to the story
with the original language.
Original language, really spellbinding, somewhat scary, and mine is much more like stand-up comedy.
Yes,
and you know that's for me. I do that because it's really a family event during the day. You get little kids all the way up to seniors. And also there's a lot going on outside, so they can be easily distracted by what's outside the windows of the church.
Well, I think this is also where your improvisatory skills really, really come in handy, and you get to shine because, you know, during the nighttime version, nothing else is going on but the show and Jonathan doing his thing. But during the day at the Old Dutch Church, there's tourists from all over the world that come to Sleepy Hollow, and they're just all over the Old Dutch
grounds,
Church, the grounds, and they're looking in from outside. You have traffic because there's no parking. You know, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but it's like, you know, if you're coming to the show, come early and in order to get a good parking spot.
That's right. Because
there's so many people there who are just all over the grounds. They are visiting Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, which is right next door. Right. Old Dutch Church, they also have like they might have maps and tours and all these other things going on. So people are just crawling everywhere.
That's right.
So there are times when you have had to, I wouldn't say break character as much as you'd have to do things to get people back into focus.
That's right, yeah.
So can you give like an example?
Oh, sure. At one time, there was a couple of tourists who were leaning into the window and distracting my audience. So I had to tell them, you should have bought a ticket.
I remember that. And was there another time, like during the show, you went like, boo?
Yeah, there was a couple of tourists who were taking photos with their backs to the window, and my audience was staring at that, so I went up to the window and scared the snot out of them.
And I remember when the audience laughed, you said, I've been waiting months to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, and one of my other favorites was there was like this whole motorcycle,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, gang or team.
Well, club.
Yeah, motorcycle club. Yes, they were just making their motorcycles just making. There was a whole bunch of them, at least 12, I think.
More than that, but
yeah, it was just and you're doing your thing, telling the story during the day, and then there's and just it was so loud and what did you say?
I leaned out the window and said, I'm trying to work here.
And that's just really great how your sense of humor and your ability to improvise in the moment. Because like I think when Jonathan is doing he's doing the story by the book, he doesn't really have the opportunity to break character like that.
It's true. And also, because his show is less about comedy, it's a little unsettling if he was to suddenly change gears like that.
Yeah. But you do that all the time.
Short attention span.
Yeah, well, that's all right. It works. It totally works. And speaking of John Payne, I love him. He's just, the sexton of the old Dutch church of Sleepy Hollow. He's the caretaker and he lights the candles, and he also introduces the storytellers.
That's
Whether
right.
it's you or it's Jonathan, he introduces the show, the performers, and he also gives housekeeping. Because it is such an old building, he has to give the rules, to also say things like, the exits are this way. These are the only exits.
Yeah.
And, so this is where you have to go. And then he also has like his shtick, and he's like, if you are close to the, if you're near one of the windows where the
Headless Horseman is coming in.
you can leave whatever window you want, and that's kind of funny. And you two kind of have like a little bit of a
rapport, a little jokey thing.
yeah,
that goes
like
on.
how old is it? How old is it? That's really funny. And of course, John Payne's a funny guy. He has his own other shtick because as sexton, that means he's also involved in the burials because it's still an active congregation, and also when congregation members die, he's also involved in the burials. So he likes to say that he's the last one to let you down.
Such a dad joke.
I know. Well, and speaking of dad, last year when we were doing our Huldah, the other legend of Sleepy Hollow, for the first time, John's daughter Temper did the introductions for my show or for our show, and it was just really cool to have that circle of life, to have her
continue the tradition,
and even use some of his jokes as well.
Yeah.
Oh, now also I was just thinking, when you were the storyteller, you needed a musician.
It's true, I did, yeah.
Yes.
Because I couldn't do both.
Right, exactly. And so that was really cool. So let's see. Master musician Ayodele Makaru was your accompanist, and he brought his own flavor.
Definitely.
And now the instrument that Ayodele played to accompany you was the Greek bouzouki, of all things. How did that come about?
It's an interesting thing because technically he was playing an Irish bouzouki. And the bouzouki originated in Greece and is a round-backed instrument. And over the years, Irish musicians who were touring found this instrument and adapted it to their style for traditional music.
How interesting.
Yeah. So we chose that instrument. Ayodele came up to the house, and we went through a whole bunch of different instruments, guitars, banjos, mandolins, and I showed him the bouzouki I had, and he started playing it, and we both went, that's the sound. That's the one.
Wow.
Yeah. He didn't even own one, so for the first year, he played my bouzouki.
Wait, now was that acoustic or electric?
Well, it was an acoustic with a microphone on it.
Acoustic with a microphone on it?
Yeah, I clipped a microphone to it.
Oh, okay, cool. Now, which is so interesting because I remember last year there was this, speaking of not having any electricity. I mean, the electricity at the old Dutch church is so limited. Like there's
just one line of power going in.
Right, and that's used for the
organ fan.
The organ
and the PA.
The organ fan and the PA. And then we also use it for the lights.
Yes,
we
for
have
the
the
lights.
spotlights that we use for you all. Last year.
No, not last year.
Well, 2 years ago?
Yeah, the last year that I
right.
did the daytime storytelling.
Right.
Which was 2019.
Right, and that was before COVID changed everything. Right. So that was like 2019?
2019.
Yeah, okay. So 2019, you were still doing the daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And then a Yodele happened to leave his bouzouki
In the church.
which he really never does.
I never know what he does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing
I
about
think
me,
he had something going on afterwards.
Yes.
So he left the bouzouki in
and
the
he had,
church.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to say, I'm always there because
So you would know better.
Yeah, and not even that. I mean that if I wanted to see you during October, I had to be there.
That's true.
So I found things to do. So I would be helping everyone get dressed, or Jonathan get him sorted, or help people with their microphones. So I was like unofficial production
Den mother.
person. Yes, exactly. Like, come on, guys, it's time. Come on, it's time. Break time's over. Anyway, so I think that was like this particular day. I think you're right that Yodele had something going on that night, and he left the bouzouki in the church overnight, which I don't think he's ever really done, but he needed to leave it there, and it's fine, it's safe. So there was this weird thing that happened, that electricity was out, so we didn't have the lights for that first episode. For the first show. For that first quote unquote evening show where it's still light. Jonathan did not have. There was not going to be any lights. There was
not
going to be
any microphones.
Microphones.
There were not going to be. My instruments are at this point. I had changed over to an electronic organ instead of the church's pipe organ because that was too loud for Jonathan.
Yes, let's talk about that.
And even if I hadn't, that still the fan wouldn't have worked. So it's a spoken word performance,
right?
And I used to play the church's pipe organ, which was it's a really loud instrument, and it's cool because it makes the building vibrate and so forth. You could really scare the snot out of people. But even with a microphone, it was overpowering poor Jonathan because he's just one guy doing a spoken word performance. So I got an electronic organ at which I can control the volume and play at much lower volumes.
But could people see you playing?
Yeah, because at this point
thing?
I was on the stage or altar with Jonathan. Yeah.
Oh no! But I mean, at this point, didn't you have it sort of in
I was getting there. Yeah.
okay.
Had a box built for it, so it looked like I was playing an old instrument, old wooden box.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, kind of camouflage. That you had this old. Wasn't the box?
It was made from wood from the Phillipsburg mill, so the wood may have been really old.
Yeah. So what was the joke that you said?
The joke was the box is brand new, but the wood's really old, so I don't know how old the box is.
It's very clever. So at this particular show, it was the first evening, the first show of the evening, which was still light ish, and there was no electricity, so you couldn't play your keyboard.
That's right.
And
Jonathan had no microphone.
No lights, well, except for the candles. However, since Yodele's bouzouki was there, I remember thinking, oh wait, I don't think it was necessarily my idea, but maybe it was. I was just like, well, Yodele's bouzouki is here, so I remember walking it to you and saying, can you play this?
Yeah, well, we hadn't started the show yet, so I was up there tap dancing as fast as I could, doing magic tricks and telling jokes and so forth. So my recollection is that you walked up with the bouzouki, and it made sense that, all right, this is how we're doing the show. And it is. That's what we did.
Yeah, and well, tell us a little bit about your also when you are the accompanist, you also open the show. And you have a little bit of a shtick that you do.
Oh, you mean when I'm changing my shoes?
Yeah, you change your shoes.
I just crack some jokes beforehand. It's not a big deal.
Well, it is. It's kind of fun, but you definitely, for that particular day, you totally feel like you kind of, as you said, you were tap dancing as fast as you could.
No, there is a whole routine I do about introducing the organ and telling a couple of jokes and just lightening up the crowd before Jonathan gets down there.
Yeah, but this particular time we didn't have electricity.
city, and we didn't know what we were going to do, and my time on stage got longer and longer and longer, and I was running out of material. Yeah.
Yeah, so I brought you the bouzouki, and I'm like, can you do something with this?
Yeah.
And y'all did.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a really cool,
Intimate
performance. And luckily, the electricity kicked back in for the second
and third show. Yeah.
second and third show. But for a second there, we're like, I don't know what we're going to do.
It's true.
Because, audience members, they love the show. You better not.
People would have been really disappointed to be turned away.
Rioting, like.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Well, remember last year with Sunnyside, we'll talk about that in a second. We never want to cancel the show. We never want to turn anyone away.
That's right.
And, people come from really far distances and really close ones too.
Come from all over the world.
Yeah, all over the world to hear this story. So when there's some kind of, some mishap that keeps that from happening, even if it's something natural like rain or storms, people don't want to hear about that.
One show last year at Sunnyside. We've been doing the show at Sunnyside, which is Washington Irving's home, since COVID. At the year 2020, we did not do any show, but Historic Hudson Valley made a short film.
Yes.
Which was really fun to work on. I did the music for that as well.
That was The Misadventures of Ichabod Crane.
And if you look that up, you can still find it online, The Misadventures of Ichabod Crane. But after that, we started doing The Legend of Sleepy Hollow outside.
Wait. Before we go there, let's talk a little bit more about The Misadventures of Ichabod Crane because well, for one thing, it was produced by our friends Leslie and Guido, and we did a lot of production work for that too, to get that thing happening. And you also won the Imaginarium Award.
That.
You're so modest for best sound effects in this Imaginarium Film Festival. That was like so cool. So, it was during COVID, so we couldn't be in the church and have those same kind of performances. So instead, Historic Hudson Valley used this time to put this film together, this short film, and it's appeared in many film festivals, and it's even won some awards.
Yes,
and and you did the sound.
One of them, yeah.
So you even won an award for that, which is so cool. And I did wardrobe and makeup for that, which is really cool. So yeah, I'm in IMDb now. Well, actually, we both are. Yeah. But you want to check us out on IMDb? You can find us there. Internet Movie Database. Yeah, that's it. So that was that. So then. Now, we're still post-COVID and people were feeling kind of like, well, I don't know what they want to do. Then we moved to Sunnyside. Now tell us about that.
Which is Washington Irving's home. It's a historic site run by Historic Hudson Valley. And there isn't technically actually a performing space, an indoor one anyway. So we perform the show outdoors. But that means we are at the mercy of the elements.
Yes.
So, if it rains... depending on how heavy the rain is, we'll continue the show. However, lightning means we have to cancel.
Yes.
And one night we had to end the show about halfway through because of lightning.
But
they would not. They did not want to leave in spite of the danger.
Was that Stev? Stev was the manager on duty that night, and he was like, "I'm sorry, folks, you have to go." And people were like, "Ooh." And Fiona Galloway is the other manager. She's like the head,
the events coordinator.
And between the two of them, and also Carlton, they would make sure that the show kept moving. But this was a particular night where we had to actually cancel. Or we had to stop it.
Stop the show halfway through.
Yeah, because
things had changed because I couldn't play my keyboards out in the rain, so I was playing guitar for this.
Again, good thing you had a guitar with you.
Well, now I always carry it as a backup in case of the rains.
Yeah. So, it's live theater, folks. You think. Well, you plan for one particular kind of performance, and then
stuff happens,
and then you have to quickly adapt, because we're in the kitchen yard.
We're in what they call the kitchen yard, which is the backyard, as it were, of Sunnyside. And that's where, back in the day, during Irving's day, that's where a lot of the work was done. There's a root cellar, there's an ice house, there's various outdoor structures for storage and whatnot. It's also where the outhouses are.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are they still there now?
Yeah, they're still there now. We just don't use them.
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah.
And then when it would rain, we would move to, there was this tent
A
area.
reception area with a big tent.
Yeah, and we moved all of Stev moved the seats. I didn't move anything. By this time, by last year, I got promoted, and I got a acting gig, kind of acting / tour gig. That was really fun last year because in addition to Jonathan was telling his story, you no longer had the box. At this point, you had...
everything's out in the open.
Everything, yes, because you're also using an iPad.
Using an iPad and a synthesizer, and there's a lot going on.
Because you have all these cool sounds, and there was also a horse.
Oh yeah, and I never saw the horse, but apparently there was a live horse as part of the show.
Yes, there was a headless horseman.
They tell me.
I know, it's crazy. Well, because you always had to stay in
my little booth playing my keyboards. Yep.
So what we would do, the other thing that we got to do, so primarily this has always been a one-man storyteller show, at least, at the time. But last year, Historic Hudson Valley did something different where they brought 4 actors to also participate. So, and I got to be one of those actors. That's why I said I got promotion. Yeah. I got paid. It was great. And I got to dress up. Chris Leidenfrost was sort of like the head actor coordinator. He made sure to get actors, he hired them or helped bring them in. And we all dressed in ghoulish makeup. Right. So I never knew how to do that before. So Chris made a video for all of us. So I got to have look like dead. Mm-hmm. And then as Jonathan would tell the story, we would all come in at different times and sort of reenact. Although we were looking scary, right, we would still be part of the story. We got to act out little parts. So I got to be Dame Van Winkle. Mm-hmm. So he would tell the story in this about how Ichabod Crane, because he was the school teacher, he didn't make enough money to feed himself. So he would
flatter the housewives.
Right. So I got
get invited to dinner.
Exactly. So it's this one scene where Jonathan is going to my character and saying, "Oh, Dame Van Winkle, your eyes are so bright," and here I am in scary ghoulish makeup, and I'm like, and totally falling for it, and it's just really fun. And in addition to that, they're very smart, Historic Hudson Valley and Fiona, how they worked that out, because we did double duty. In addition to being actors in the kind of pantomiming different parts of the story, we were also tour guides. Right. So for each performance, there you go, we would each take groups from the reception area down to the kitchen yard. So we'd be walking back and forth, and so I would grab a group of people and I would be walking down towards the kitchen yard with them, and I would be giving a little explanation, doing a little interpretation on
the show on
Irving.
The
show on Irving, because one of my things used to be, I'd say something like see this house, this was paid for. So this house was paid for by the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. This is where he made it. This is where he spent his money. I don't know. It sounded funny at the time, and I would ask people, what was his most well-known story, right, and people would often guess that, or they guess some other weird thing. I would ask people how where people came from, and and I would see who came the farthest. Be like, "Oh, you won. Yeah. You don't really get a prize or anything, but that's great," because that's also how I got to see how many people would come from so far away. Yeah. And I mean, we even had people coming from Salem, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, so you live in Salem?" So you're like, "No, I'm not going to. F that. I'm coming to." I'm coming to watch Sleepy Hollow. Yeah. So that was fun. And what else would we do?
Well, let's talk more about the story. where the characters came from? And
So we're talking about Washington Irving as a writer, and you think about, well, where does he get his inspiration?
Right.
So I just learned that Ichabod Crane was actually a real person. There's actually a person named Ichabod Crane.
Oh, no way.
For real. Mm-hmm. He served under Governor Daniel D. Tompkins during the War of 1812.
Oh.
And as an aide de camp, along with Washington Irving. See, I didn't even know.
Never knew.
Yeah, Washington Irving served in the War of 1812, and Ichabod Crane was this dude that he knew. And I found and also Ichabod Crane was from Staten Island.
Oh.
Yeah, shout out to my Staten Island folks. So I found a 1848 Daguerreotype.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Old type of photography.
Okay, portrait of Ichabod Crane. And I learned that he was a colonel who served in the military for 45 years.
Wow.
Yeah. He wasn't skinny. He didn't resemble the school teacher, but
just the name.
Yeah, just the name.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, I see you, Washington Irving.
Yeah,
I see where you guys. I'm like, okay, you know someone.
Just think, if Irving had chosen James Bond, we'd have a whole different idea of what he looked like.
It's true. But the real Ichabod Crane wasn't skinny. So.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So Katrina Van Tassel,
right,
the romantic, the female love interest, was probably based on Washington Irving's neighbor.
Oh.
He had a neighbor by the name of Eleanor Van Tassel Brush. Now, the original character, Katrina Van Tassel. So the neighbor is Eleanor Van Tassel Brush. It says, although the name Katrina was probably borrowed from Eleanor's aunt Katrina, and she spelled it with a C.
Oh, Katrina with a C.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. And another little factoid I learned was that Washington Irving's sister also boarded at this home. And so they were neighbors. So this is like...
Yeah. It is believed that Irving heard the story of the Headless Horseman as a kid when he would visit in Sleepy Hollow. He spent his summers there. He grew up in New York City and would spend his summers in Sleepy Hollow, and he heard a few stories there, not the least of which was the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. And I have one more.
Tell
one
me.
more real person. Brom Bones.
Oh, right.
The burly guy.
How could we forget?
Exactly. He was also inspired by a real person. His name was Abraham Martling, because Abraham was like Brom was the nickname for people named Abraham. Yeah. So Brom Bones was the town blacksmith. And he rode a giant black horse, much like Brom Bones in the story.
Right.
Yeah, so,
How about that?
Yeah. So that's all I guess that's the meat of the story, the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Yeah.
So now that you know.
You know.